Welcome, dear viewers, to an evening of pure relaxation and enchantment. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more enchanting adventures. Now let's begin. Your god isn't a god, and not even her worshippers think she is. By already Freddy Krueger. I left this GM's game because he had discussed character building stuff with me in the beginning, and then randomly changed gears and acted like we had never discussed anything, even though the discussion was in writing. More detail. I joined this game along with some friends from a different game. We had discussed my cleric's relationship with her god, and we decided on a few key factors. Her god was encouraging her to do some vengeance and murder, which is generally not good and caused her to be fully exiled from her clan. She didn't know anything about her god except that her god was like, go do a revenge quest, have some spells, become the storm. She specifically did not know her god's name. This was all in writing and mutually agreed on. So anyway, halfway through my part of the campaign, the GM introduces an NPC who says that her entire tribe openly worshipped the pantheon this god was from. I continue role-playing my character as pretty ignorant of this, and he says, "You know who the god is, it's Lightning McZapface." I say, "Yes, I know." My character doesn't, though. So he immediately has the NPC explain it to my character. We're in like session 5, so I'm like, okay, I kinda wish he would have told me he didn't like that idea earlier, but whatever, and I roll with it. So a few sessions later, I have my character comment that she's doing something for her god, and the GM says, "It's not a god." And I say, my character thinks it's a god, but it's not a god. But you just said her whole tribe worships them, so wouldn't they think it's a god? No, because it's not a god. I cut the conversation short and continue the session because I could tell this wasn't going anywhere. He introduced a bunch of elements to his setting that were explicitly about debunking the pantheons as false gods because they were all actually ascended mortals, which could have been cool if he wasn't so weird and passive-aggressive about having different factions and characters believe different things. Anyway, the GM apparently OOC had some negative feelings about religion that informed how he ran the game, which I didn't know until after I played with him, or I would have rolled up with a storm sorcerer instead. The final straw came at the end of an arc, where we found out that a scroll we'd been given was trapped and being used to spy on us. The GM mocked us for not checking for traps, however. I specifically handed it to the wizard to transcribe early on, which should have given her a chance to notice, and GM simply ignored me and pretended this never happened. At that point, I felt we'd gotten to a good point for me to hop out without disrupting the campaign, and he left and was kicked from a different campaign we were players in for not paying attention and refusing to do any quests. We eventually picked that campaign back up and reached a reasonably satisfying stopping point. I really wish I could give this dude benefit of the doubt, but as my old GM pointed out, he consistently tried to sleep with romance every female character he encountered, and got hostile when they wouldn't accept his advances or just weren't romanceable. I realized that he consistently had NPCs remark on how unattractive my cleric was, mostly by commenting on her weight and size, which I hadn't even described. He didn't do this to the other players, and it bothered me then, but I didn't have the life experience to articulate why. TLDR. GM randomly retcons previously discussed story elements because he has opinions about religion and women. Tells my character she's fat, and her god isn't a god, and no, she doesn't think it's a god because there are no gods and no one thinks there are, not even their worshippers, except for the unwashed masses who mistakenly believe in the false gods. But no, you can't be one of those masses. Also, don't ask me what Lightning McZapface's name actually was, I don't remember. Overqualified. Also by Horny Buttered. There was a post a little while ago about the DM who didn't trust anyone who knew more math than he did, and it reminded me of one of my weirdest encounters, and maybe a dodged bullet. I had moved to a new town for grad school, and after I got settled, I wanted to game. Problem: I knew no one. So I went to the FLGS and answered a LFP, talked to the DM, and he invited me over to his apartment to talk about a character in advance of the first session of a new campaign. I go over, we've both been gaming a long time, we bond over that. I make a cleric since his other two players are a fighter and a thief, and everything is fine. The other players show up after about an hour and we sit down to play. The DM starts us off at the entrance to the cave outside of town where the goblins are holed up. What goblins? What town? I don't want to waste time on role-playing, he said. Well, anyway, we go on. It's a bog-standard dungeon crawl, no surprises, 0 RP, and it's fine, I guess. Not my jam, but to each their own, and it's my only option at the moment. So... Anyway, we're playing a few hours and we're in a large cave, and I use my sling to attack a goblin who is like 40 feet away and 30 feet up, on some platform or something, I think. The exact details are not important except this. The linear distance was less than the range increment for slings in 3E, and the total distance over and up, if for some reason you added them, was more than the range increment. DM informs me I have a penalty to hit, for range. I'm confused. You said he was only 40 feet away. Yeah, and 30 feet up. That's 70 feet and outside your range increment, so you get a -2 to hit. Without thinking, I said, "That's not the way it works. The stone doesn't travel all the way over and then all the way up. It goes in a straight line." To illustrate, I draw a right triangle on the battle mat, pointing out that the distance across is 40 and the distance up is 30. But the distance the stone travels along the hypotenuse is clearly not either of those. Now, I might have been nicer about it, but I was in no way abrupt or abrasive. Anyone who knows me knows that's just not my style. I'm pretty mild most of the time, especially around new people. Still, the DM stares blankly at the drawing for a moment and then snaps, "Well, how do you figure the distance then?" I remember very specifically he emphasized the "you" in the sentence, like it was my personal technique. I quickly explained the Pythagorean theorem and did the calculation, which came out, of course, to 50 yar, exactly at the limit of my range increment. The DM was quiet for a moment, and then very nastily said, "What did you say you do for a living?" I hadn't said. It hadn't come up. But I confirm I'm in grad school, which is why I moved to town. "So you have a college degree then?" I acknowledged I had a basically useless English degree, yes. I refrained from mentioning that the formula I used is considered 8th grade level math. He didn't say anything else about it, but I wasn't there for long after that little conversation. Every goblin in the cave dogpiled me. They couldn't miss and I couldn't hit no matter what I rolled. My character dropped, and the DM flat out said that the body was too mangled to revive, and my character was permadead. I tried to be the one to have some class in the situation, thanking him for hosting and for the game, letting him know I had fun, and bidding goodnight to the other players. Needless to say, I was not invited back. Clearly, my BA in English from a speaking generously mid-level state university made me some kind of elitist who was not to be associated with. The Tale of the Sorcerer Who Only Learned Damage Spells by Moonveil Noob. Not sorry for any spelling or formatting errors. English is my first language. I am just a dumbass. Game is 5 ER heroes begin their quest at the table of Maven, the new DM. Our characters include Maven, me DM, Josh, Rogue, Alice, my GF playing Sorcerer. Names not changed because that is their names. So I started a campaign and was at a part of the story that focused on another player who had to miss 2 weeks of games. In my infinite wisdom, I made a little 2-shot adventure. I thought I did a decent job making the thing. We started at level 7. They seemed to enjoy the first session. It started in a magical hedge maze filled with golems tasked with cleaning up pests, viewing the party as pests. Shenanigans ensued. Clever use of spacing allowed the party to keep their distance and limit the ability of the constructs to find them. But when they did get caught, the first problem was made clear. Alice only had damaging spells. No buffs, no debuffs, no movement, and no control. Not even something to get away from melee. We only had one other small combat, but at the end of the first session, I came forward with the issue. "Hey, between sessions, if you like, you can alter your spell list. Only one session left, but you might want some spells besides just damage. Sometimes status conditions prove to be most useful." She replied with, "Oh yeah, I will look into some." I left it at that. Next week rolls around and I assumed everything was fine. The rest of the session was exploration and solving a puzzle before arriving at the fortress of the final fight. The goal of the fight was to bring the gem they were carrying to the portal to escape this maze world. They could do this with very high stealth and clever use of the environment. They could try to run by and hope this giant did not hit them. Or they could fight it. They chose to fight it. Round 1. Somehow the sorcerer goes first. She decides to cast a lightning bolt on the giant. I give her an arcana check first to discern the nature of the giant's weapon. She passes the check, I say. Her sword seems to be magical in nature, buzzing with faint electricity. You get the sense it may be able to absorb electric damage. A point of interest is that several of the minions in the previous session could absorb lightning. She says, "Well, I am going to try it anyway." The boss fails the save, and I explain how he takes full damage, but the sword seems to be empowered. He uses this sword to slam the ground, causing them to have to make a save or be blinded for a round, as well as the room fracturing and the ground becoming uneven. This description was to both explain how one does not want to be hit by an empowered sword, as well as give the rogue some cover and a way for the players to use the environment. The fight goes on. Everyone takes some damage. The rogue is good at distracting the giant and making it chase him while the sorcerer casts some spells. But as the fight nears its end, the giant is in melee with the sorcerer. To this point, she has still only cast damage spells. She is not new to the game, so I do not explain how to play her character with strategy. But she casts lightning bolt again. I ask, "Are you sure? If he doesn't die, his next attack will do a lot of extra damage. He will likely not hit the ground, he will probably hit you." She replies, "Yeah, I'm going to go for it. It does a lot of damage." I shrug and roll. He makes the save, but still takes damage. The sword is empowered, and the giant crits on its first hit. Between the damage it already did, plus the doubling of the empowered strike, a crit did a lot of damage. So, of course, she was downed. The fight continues for a few rounds of play. The rogue manages to keep out of touch of the giant and pepper it with arrows until it finally goes down. While he did this, the sorcerer failed her death saves. Now this is the bad part. I assumed everything was fine as the 2-shot ended that night anyway, so no big deal if you die. But after Josh left, I noticed Alice was quiet. I asked her if she was upset, before I got an entire rant about how I always target her, and how I make her look dumb in front of people. I have never dropped a character of hers before. I tried to explain that she was not used to sorcerer shit happens, but for the squishier classes, it is best to stay back. I also suggested a variety of spells be used when making a sorcerer not just damage, as well as not casting spells that upgrade the enemy. But it seems my explanations were no use. She didn't talk to me for a few days despite us living together. I ended up dropping the other campaign since it was made as something fun for her to do. Now she wants to start again. How would one recommend keeping the game difficult, requiring strategy and combat but not making her feel bad? Any ideas to make the illusion of danger without a risk of dropping her characters?